I thought she loved me, but she was playing with me, and my revenge was the last thing she remembered. Listen to the end of the story to find out how I did it. I wasn't looking for trouble. That's what kept running through my head as I sat in the passenger seat of the taxi, the LA skyline flickering behind me like static on a dead channel. I had one job that evening: fly to Denver, shake hands at some fake business dinner, talk up a client who thought innovation meant changing their font. But instead of boarding that plane, I walked a half block from our house, unlocked the door of the apartment I rented under a fake name, and started watching my own life fall apart like I was flipping channels on someone else's TV. Cindy didn't know I was here. She thought she kissed me goodbye at the airport, thought she was so clever with her soft, rehearsed, "miss you already," and that perfume she only wore when she was meeting clients who stared too long. But I had seen it, the iCloud alert flashing on our shared iPad like a beacon in the dark. New device connected, Derek's Beats. The name hit me like a brick wrapped in velvet. We didn't know a Derek. We damn sure didn't own Beats. My hands didn't shake when I started digging. I just moved like I was back in college, prepping for finals. Deliberate, focused, methodical. Location history was the nail in her coffin. Her route that afternoon was printed in digital ink, not a straight shot to her downtown office like she claimed. She took a detour, first a spa in Silver Lake, then a cozy Italian joint I used to reserve on anniversaries, and finally a motel in Santa Monica with hourly rates and no shame in their branding. That night, I sat 3 buildings away, on a balcony with a camera zoomed in like a rifle scope, and I watched my wife walk into that motel with a man I'd never seen before. I remember everything: the curve of her laugh as she leaned her head on his shoulder, the way she pressed her hand against his chest like it belonged there. But mostly I remember the shirt. It was blue, not navy, not sky, something in between. The kind of blue you find on vacation homes by the water, arrogant in its comfort. I burned the color into memory. For 3 days I became a shadow with purpose. I asked my brother to meet me behind the auto shop where he worked, handed him a folded 100 and my wife's car keys, and he understood without asking. 30 minutes later, there was a pinhole camera stitched into the fabric of her car's dashboard. The next morning, while she was sipping her green juice and pretending I didn't know she lied, I watched the footage on my tablet, Cindy laughing, twisting her hair around her finger, handing over my Rolex to that same man. "It suits him," she said. My Rolex, a gift from my father after my first real promotion, and now it was dangling off the wrist of a stranger she met in some fitness studio or boutique ad campaign. I didn't confront her. I never even raised my voice. Instead, I called Arlo, an old film school buddy who now made drone ads for real estate tycoons. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I told him what I needed, his voice dropped to a whisper and said, "I'm in." While Arlo tracked her movements from above, I got to work underground. I cloned our joint bank accounts and changed every password I could get my hands on. I scrolled through charges, spa visits, hotel check-ins, delivery sushi for 2, and matched them to her calendar full of late meetings and conference calls. I built a map. Then I made a presentation, the kind you'd show at a corporate retreat if your company specialized in betrayal. Cindy's Double Life, on my dime. That was the title. It had slides, dates, receipts, drone footage, audio, even her texts, exported and highlighted. The kind of thing you'd watch in a courtroom and wonder why the defendant even showed up. I saved the whole thing onto a silver USB drive and placed it in a velvet box. That Friday, I made a reservation at the same restaurant she'd picked for her fake contract signing celebration. Candlelight, good wine, live jazz. I sat at a table near the kitchen, just out of view. When they walked in, Derek in that same blue shirt, Cindy in a red dress I'd bought her for our last anniversary. I gave the waiter a signal. He brought her a chilled glass of champagne, nestled beside the velvet box. I watched from the security camera feed on my phone as she opened it, smiled politely, and then froze. Her fingers tightened. Her expression changed. Derek leaned in. "What's this?" he mouthed, probably trying to act like he had half a brain. But she knew. She stood up and walked out. I stayed. I sipped my whiskey slowly, the way I always wanted to, without Cindy making faces about how I drank like a grandpa. I watched her retreat from the monitor, her heels clacking like punctuation marks on an unfinished sentence. And for the first time in months, I smiled. Not with joy, but with clarity. She thought this was the end, but it was just the introduction. I spent the next 72 hours less like a husband and more like an analyst tearing apart a failing company. Every detail mattered. I stopped sleeping through the night, not from stress, but from a need to understand everything. I wanted to know not just what she was doing, but how. How she thought she could get away with this. How she moved money without hesitation. How she looked into my eyes over breakfast and said, "Don't forget your umbrella," while stealing the roof over our heads in secret. Arlo sent me daily updates. He worked fast, faster than I expected, weaving through alleys in a compact van loaded with camera gear and mounted GoPros. I gave him a budget, and he laughed, said, "This is personal. I'm in." He caught her leaving that same motel again, once wearing yoga pants she hadn't worn since our honeymoon in Cabo, the ones she said made her feel young again. She got into her car, waved at someone off camera, and blew a kiss before driving off. That afternoon, I sat with my brother inside the garage, under the rusted underbelly of a Cadillac, watching the hidden footage from Cindy's car on a laptop balanced across our knees. There she was. Same man, same voice. "You like it?" she asked, holding up my Rolex. He grinned and kissed her wrist like some kind of discount Bond villain. Then she said it. "It suits you better than him anyway." My brother, whose fingers were stained with motor oil and loyalty, glanced at me and whispered, "She's done." And I just nodded. But I wasn't angry. I was methodical. I went home, not to the apartment I shared with her, but to the rental unit I'd filled with cables, coffee, and cold plans. I logged into our shared financial dashboard and launched the tracker I'd secretly installed on her phone a week earlier. I named it Garden, like the place Eve made her choice. Every expense, every scan, every tap on her card popped up in real time. I watched her buy him a laptop from a boutique electronics store. Same model I'd been saving up for. She paid with our joint card. Then she used the same account to buy photography courses. I traced them to a well-known online school that cost over $1,200. She even added a gift message. "For your vision, can't wait to see the world through your lens." My lens saw everything now. I called Arlo again and told him I needed aerials. Clear shots of her walking with Derek, hand in hand, through the city like no one existed but the two of them. The next evening, he delivered drone footage of them exiting the art museum downtown. She had always said she hated museums. "Too much quiet," she'd once said. "It makes me feel trapped." But now she laughed and clung to his arm as if silence had become romantic, as if lies sounded better with marble columns in the background. I compiled it all, added it to the timeline. Morning purchases, afternoon meetings that were really hotel visits, evening walks, recurring charges for food delivery that matched his address. It became a living document, evolving, adapting, the kind of evidence a prosecutor could dream about. Then I refined the presentation. Slide 1, Day 1, the start of her new life. Slide 34, Gift, $850 designer watch. Not for husband. I recorded the narration myself, calm, detached, like I was pitching to a boardroom instead of recounting the slow bleed of my own marriage. Then I bought the box. It was black velvet, hand-stitched, designed to hold a ring or a secret. I slid the USB in like it was a diamond and shut it tight. That box didn't hold revenge. Not yet. It held the truth, crystallized in timelines and receipts. The difference was simple. Revenge screams. Truth echoes. That night I called her parents. Her mother picked up after 3 rings, her voice tired in that way that sounds like it's been disappointed too many times. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't even say her name. I just asked them if they had time to receive something. Something important. "It's about Cindy," I said, "but not what she told you." I sent the screenshots, dated, watermarked, cropped so there was no confusion. Her father never replied. Her mother called twice and cried both times. I only picked up once. "I'm sorry," she whispered through choked sobs. "I thought she was just tired. I didn't know." I did, I replied, flat and final. I stopped covering for her. Afterward, I poured a drink, dark and clean, and stared at the box. Then I made one last reservation. At the same restaurant Cindy planned to celebrate her fabricated contract signing. A place where champagne glasses were tall and laughter echoed off stone walls. When she arrived with Derek, dressed like a magazine cover and drunk on secrecy, the waiter approached her table. I watched from the side room, nestled behind a lattice screen like some forgotten architect of doom. He placed a single glass of champagne in front of her. No menu, no specials, just a velvet box tied in silver ribbon. Cindy smiled. She probably thought it was a proposal. She opened it. Her hands froze. Derek leaned in. I saw his lips move. "What's that?" But she didn't respond. Her face drained. Her whole posture shifted like gravity had betrayed her. And then, without a word, she stood up and walked straight out. No excuses, no explanations. She didn't even glance at him. He looked around confused, then reached for the box, opened it, saw the USB, and laughed. The kind of laugh that's hollow, self-conscious. He set it down like it burned him. In the next room, I sat alone with a whiskey neat and a silent phone. And for the first time in years, I didn't care if she called. By the next morning, she was clawing at the edges of a world she didn't recognize. I didn't need to be there to see it. I'd orchestrated enough to feel the weight of her panic in the air. The luxury she wrapped herself in had teeth now, and they were starting to bite back. I'd locked her out of everything before the sun had risen. Every login, every shared profile, every damn thing we ever split between his and hers was now mine. And cold silence was the only password left behind. I watched her through the peephole when she came to the door, still in that same red dress from the restaurant. Her eyes were bloodshot, makeup smudged, hair pinned up in a loose knot like she didn't even care anymore. She tried the key card. Dead. Typed the old code. Denied. Knocked once. Soft. Then pounded. Then screamed. I didn't open it. Let her scream into the hallway. Let the neighbors hear it. Let her invent a new version of herself in real time. The one where she's the misunderstood wife, the victim of some cold, calculated man. The truth was, I didn't have to say a word. She was burying herself now. That afternoon, the letter arrived at her new address, the one she'd given the leasing office behind my back. Standard delivery, nothing dramatic. Inside, a single-page legal notice, termination of access to shared property, a detailed itemization of financial division, and a one-time transfer of $15,600. Just enough to shut her mouth without letting her walk away clean. The car title was hers now too. Let her figure out how to maintain a luxury ride on a temp salary. I wanted her to have just enough to feel the absence of more. Then came the panic posts. Instagram black and white selfies with vague captions like, "Sometimes silence is the loudest betrayal," trying to set the stage for sympathy. I waited. Within a few hours, she started shaping her fiction online. When love becomes control. It's scary when someone shows their true face. Subtle jabs, careful enough not to name me, but designed to ignite whispers. So I lit a damn bonfire. I sent her company an anonymous email. Simple and surgical. Attached was a video file, footage from the dashboard cam, captured during a drive when she bragged about faking sick leave for a spa weekend. "They'll never know," she said on camera, "as long as I update the damn Slack status to doctor's appointment." I included timestamps, date verification, GPS metadata. My friend in IT made it look like a whistleblower breach. In less than 2 hours, the office was in full crisis mode. Her work laptop was disabled remotely. Her badge deactivated. The only thing she had left was a name, and even that was starting to rot. Then I made a move she didn't expect. I reached out to her sister. I hadn't spoken to Melanie in over a year, not since she drunkenly admitted at a New Year's party that Cindy had always envied the safe way I made her feel. I never asked what that meant, not until now. I sent her a message, attached with a proposal. I wanted to create a fund for her son. Not a bribe, a gesture. She asked why. My response was 2 lines. Because he deserves better than what your sister taught you was love. And so did I. She replied the next morning, "I'm sorry we all ignored this for so long." That evening, just before I turned my phone off, I got a final message from Cindy. One sentence, a last breath of desperation. I just need one more conversation. Just one. I stared at it. Not for the message, but for what it meant. That she still thought she had a card left to play. That somewhere inside her was the belief she could twist this back to center, reframe it, spin it like all she ever did was make mistakes out of love. So I answered, "You already had it. Everyone saw." Then I powered down the phone, leaned back in my chair, and stared out the window. Somewhere in the city, she was watching her life collapse in slow motion. But I wasn't watching anymore. I'd already moved on to the next phase. By the end of the week, Cindy was trying to reinvent herself like a brand under audit. Her social media went dark. Her calls stopped. Not because she found dignity, she just couldn't find the exits anymore. She filed a counterclaim through a firm I knew by reputation, aggressive, loud, and built for headlines. The kind of lawyers you hire when you're not seeking justice. Just noise. She accused me of violating her privacy, said I'd weaponized surveillance, called it emotional abuse. I smiled as I handed my attorney the folder I'd been building for weeks. We met in a glass tower downtown, where the windows reflected a sky that didn't care who was watching. The receptionist offered me coffee. I declined. The legal assistant took my box of evidence and disappeared. When my lawyer Darren came in, he sat down and said one word. "Damn." Inside that folder were signed documents, her signature on a forged authorization form used to pull funds from our joint trust, IP logs showing the creation of a shadow bank account, transfer records tied to her aunt's name. A woman who, I found out through 2 calls and one casual investigator, had no idea she supposedly owned beachfront property in San Diego. They thought the paper trail vanished. It didn't. She didn't even know how deep it ran. Her lawyer's tone changed by the second deposition. By the third, he looked like a man realizing his client had handed him a grenade disguised as a case file. And when I played audio of her bragging about routing our funds into something new and just mine, the expression on his face turned waxy. I didn't need a judge's reaction. The silence in that room was its own verdict. We walked out of court with the ruling tilted fully in my favor. Full division of assets. The business, mine, with no restrictions. Her access to shared property revoked. Use of the car was granted to her, but under a title transfer that would trigger a lien in 6 months unless she paid off the balance. Outside the courtroom, she stopped me. She looked thinner, brittle around the eyes. Not the put-together version she curated for everyone. Just the raw frame of a woman who realized the mask didn't fit anymore. Her voice cracked. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I looked her in the eye and said the only truth that still mattered. "Number, you just showed who you are." Then I turned and walked. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't need it. The real win was the silence afterward. Not one more lie to chase, not one more breath spent cleaning up her chaos. I walked 2 blocks before I even looked back. She was still standing there in the parking lot, surrounded by lawyers who didn't look at her the same way anymore. The next chapter didn't start with some dramatic montage. It started with a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood that smelled like wood polish and peace. No more marble countertops. No luxury decor to keep up with. I bought my own dishes, my own bed. Every item had weight because I picked it without compromise. I didn't need to decorate for 2. I wasn't curating anything anymore. For the first time in years, I unpacked my painting supplies. The ones I'd buried for marketing plans and branding meetings that she said were the future. I set up a small canvas by the window and painted whatever came. Lines, storms, abstract flashes of color that didn't need to be understood by anyone but me. During the day, I found work at an artisan workshop, restoring furniture, breathing life into old things. In the evening, I walked with the dog I adopted from a local shelter, a mutt with one bad leg and a crooked ear. We fit. I started a blog. Just thoughts at first. Notes about betrayal and rebuilding, masked under a pseudonym. I titled it After the Ash. Within a week, I had 10,000 followers. Anonymous strangers shared their stories. Echoed mine, whispered truth through digital spaces where pain felt clean and distant. And then, in the second week, an email came. No subject line, just a body of text. Can you for once not be so precise? Not everything needs to be dissected. Not everything is about you being right. There was no name, but I knew the cadence. It was Cindy. I stared at it for a moment. Not because it hurt, it didn't, but because it felt like a message from a version of her that didn't realize how far away we now live from each other. Like she still believed we were playing the same game, just on different sides. I didn't reply. I closed the tab. I fed the dog. I turned on music. I mixed a drink. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt like the man I was before her shadow arrived. I expected the next move. People like Cindy never quit while they're behind. They don't accept collapse. They call it sabotage. And sure enough, a week after the ruling, I got the alert. Cynthia M. versus my name. Countersuit filed. Civil claim. Emotional distress. Invasion of privacy. Unlawful surveillance. The kind of Hail Mary that reads like a script when someone realizes the truth isn't going to save them, so maybe the performance will. I didn't flinch, because what she didn't know or forgot was that the apartment she secretly co-purchased through her aunt's name, I already knew, traced the funds weeks ago, and that false authorization she signed under my name, submitted through a VPN she didn't understand. I had the metadata, the keystrokes, the screenshot that showed her logging into our account using her sister's Wi-Fi. So when the judge saw my evidence, his expression didn't even shift. He signed off on a final division of assets. Clean, sharp, and cruel. Not just because it handed me the business in full and froze her access to every shared investment, but because it also imposed a ban. She was now legally restricted from touching anything tied to my name. That meant no claiming partnership credit, no co-branding my work, no hints that she was still involved. She stood outside the courtroom afterward, alone. I passed her with a document in my hand. A quiet reminder of every careless decision she made while she thought I wasn't watching. She reached out, desperate, almost gentle. You don't have to destroy everything. I didn't even slow down. I didn't have to, because she already had. Instead, I got in my car, turned the radio up, and rolled the window down. There was something strange about the breeze that day. Warm, coastal, almost cinematic, and I let it wash over me while the city passed in soft blurs. I didn't drive home. I drove nowhere. I just kept moving. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot that evening, my phone was flooded with group chat screenshots. Cindy had tried to rally sympathy online again. Vague posts, half-lies, spinning herself as the abandoned one. Said I'd taken everything, that I went cold without warning. A few of her old friends bought it, but not many, because I leaked one thing, one quiet, final truth, a photograph. Her and Derek kissing outside the same motel where she said she had conference calls, time-stamped, date verified, shared to the same 3 people she vented to most, friends who once told her they were neutral. I knew they weren't. So I gave them the thing they needed to jump ship without guilt. And they did. Her group chat died that night. Deleted or abandoned. Either way, she was the only one still typing. A few days later, she went silent online. No new posts, no smiling stories, just digital dust and a shrinking circle. But that wasn't the end, because she did one more thing. She reached out to my network, sent emails to clients, partners, people she hadn't even met, trying to poison the well from a distance, said I was unstable, that I had dark tendencies. I saw the messages. One client forwarded them to me with a note that read, "Is this woman for real?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I already had Evelyn. Evelyn Cross, my attorney, my ace, my quiet assassin. She fired off 3 letters within 24 hours. 1 cease and desist, 1 defamation threat, and 1 final summary of every instance where Cindy violated terms of the judgment, with attachments, with footnotes. Cindy went quiet again, but just in case, I posted one thing on my blog, nothing aggressive, nothing pointed. Just a line buried in a longer post about healing after manipulation. When someone tries to burn your future, make sure you keep a copy of the receipts. By the end of the week, I had sponsors reaching out. The blog was now pulling numbers I hadn't seen since launch. I even got a book inquiry from a small publisher asking if I'd consider turning it into a memoir. I wasn't sure if I'd do it, but it made me laugh. That night, I lit a fire in the backyard and tossed in an old shoebox of photos. Wedding shots, birthday dinners, couples vacations where I now saw the lie bleeding through her smile. She used to say we should print more memories. Paper's more honest, she'd say. She was right. Paper burns faster than people, but it leaves less behind. After court, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, scraped clean, like the fight had taken everything sharp in me and left only what couldn't cut back. I found a new place. Nothing extravagant, just a 2-bedroom walk-up tucked behind a bookstore with ivy creeping up the bricks, like old scars trying to grow something green again. The walls were pale, the kitchen small, but it was mine. Every square foot was chosen, not inherited. Every object earned. There was no more echo of her voice in the rooms, no ghost of perfume in the pillows, no slammed doors or staged apologies. Just peace. And peace is a strange thing when you've lived without it for years. At first, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like emptiness. Then it starts to breathe. I bought furniture one piece at a time, like I was learning the language of permanence all over again. A worn oak table from a thrift shop, a bookshelf made of reclaimed wood, where I placed all the things she used to call clutter. My grandfather's old camera, a cracked snow globe from my childhood, the rusted lighter I'd carried for years but never used. Now they had weight again. Meaning, I picked up painting where I left off, not to escape, but to return to the version of myself she'd asked me to trade in for some image of a better man. She wanted clean suits and client dinners. I wanted color, texture, silence that didn't require explanation. I painted late into the night, a mess of oils and soft brushes and blues so deep they swallowed the past whole. And I worked. Not in the firm we used to share, not in the empire we built, and she tried to siphon through charm and manipulation, but in a small artisan workshop tucked behind an industrial lot, restoring old things, repairing the broken, stripping away layers of lacquer to reveal the shape beneath. I didn't need suits there. I didn't need anything but my hands, my patience, and the knowledge that beauty could be brought back from the brink. People started to notice. A gallery invited me to submit 3 pieces for a local showcase. I agreed without thinking much about it. Just something to do, something to mark time. But then the response came in. We want more. And beneath it, a note. Your work feels like quiet after a storm. Maybe that's all I was now. Quiet after a storm. I got a dog, the kind no one else wanted. Big eyes, uneven coat, limped on his back leg like he never learned to walk without pain. They said he was unadoptable. I said he reminded me of someone I used to be. We went on long walks at night, through the empty grid of the neighborhood, under street lamps that buzzed and flickered. He didn't bark. I didn't talk. It worked. Then came the blog. At first it was just for me, a private space to document healing under a pseudonym. I wrote about betrayal not as an explosion, but as erosion. I wrote about rebuilding without revenge, about what it means to stare at the rubble and realize the only thing still standing is you. 10,000 followers in the first week, 30,000 by the second. People shared their stories in the comments, posted photos of their own fresh starts, anonymous confessions typed late at night. I responded to everyone, not as a guru, but as a man who knew what it meant to be broken and bored of pretending otherwise. Then came the letter. No return address. Just a cream envelope slid through my mail slot with handwriting I hadn't seen since the anniversary card she left on my nightstand 2 years ago. Inside, 2 pages. No greeting, no name. It started with a sentence I didn't expect. Can you for once not be so precise? She'd underlined the word precise. Twice. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an admission. It was a complaint. A final attempt to assert that my silence had been the real cruelty, that my restraint was somehow the wound she wanted to point to. She wrote about how she felt scraped raw by being dissected, how I measured everything, how it felt like living under a microscope, as if that microscope hadn't saved me. as if I hadn't needed every inch of focus just to survive her. She ended it with something vague. Maybe someday we'll both understand the truth. I folded the letter once and slid it into the back of my sketchbook. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it felt like the last page of a chapter that had already been closed. I didn't write back. I didn't blog about it. I didn't even mention it to Evelyn or my brother. Instead, I went back to painting. The next canvas was darker, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to pretend anymore. I let the brushstroke go where they wanted. Wild, messy, mine. A month later, the gallery owner called again. "Have you considered doing a solo show?" he asked. I paused, looked around my small apartment. The dog asleep on the rug. The windows open just enough to let the light in without letting the past creep back through. "Yeah," I said, "I've considered it." And just like that, a new version of me started to take shape. Not the man she had tried to polish and parade, not the shadow she tried to outgrow. Just me, unfinished, undeniable, real. 6 months passed. Time stopped bleeding after a while. The days didn't ache the way they used to, and her name stopped echoing inside my head like a malfunctioning alarm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even curious. It was as if the storm finally took the roof off, and instead of rebuilding, I learned to live under the open sky. That gallery opened on a Thursday. The lights were warm, the walls clean. A soft jazz trio played in the corner, while people held glasses of wine and murmured about the tones, the brushwork, the emotional restraint. My paintings lined the walls, fragments of pain sealed in color, brushstrokes thick with things I could never say. Every piece had a number, not a title. No stories, just space for others to decide what it meant. Maybe because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I'd done that enough. And if someone didn't understand, that was fine. It wasn't for them anyway. A woman stopped me midway through the evening, said she felt like one of the canvases had watched her, that it understood. I smiled, didn't tell her that piece had been painted the night after I burned the last of our wedding photos. I didn't tell her anything. It was better that way. The gallery was full. I was surrounded by people I didn't owe explanations to. People who didn't know the version of me that once shrank to fit someone else's ambition. I didn't expect to see her again. But life doesn't care what you expect. It just hands you scenes and waits to see how you react. It was a grocery store, a regular Tuesday. I was in the self-checkout line, scanning dog treats and pasta sauce, when I saw her, 2 lanes over, digging through her purse, swiping a card with growing panic in her movements. Her hair was tied up, but not in the carefree way she used to do it. Her clothes were muted, the kind that look expensive from far away, but don't hold up under fluorescent light. She was thinner now, tighter around the mouth, tired. She tried the card again, declined. The cashier leaned in, said something too quiet to hear. Cindy fumbled, flustered, pulled out a second card, declined. I didn't move. She didn't see me. And for a few seconds, I watched her as someone else might, a stranger, flailing silently, trying to maintain composure while the ground she once ruled began to break beneath her heels. There was a time when I might have stepped forward, covered the cost, shielded her from shame, not because I forgave her, but because that's what I always did. I protected her from consequences, smoothed the edges of her decisions so she could keep pretending she was untouchable. But not now. Now I simply turned away. I didn't need to humiliate her. Life had already begun that process, slow and exacting. I walked out of the store, dog treats tucked under one arm, keys jingling in my palm. That door didn't slam behind me. It closed with the same soft finality as a book you finish and never reread. Everything that needed to be known, she had already felt, and I didn't need to see her again. 2 months later, the gallery extended my run. The pieces were selling faster than they could hang new ones. I got an offer to do a panel talk. I declined. I wasn't interested in telling the world how to heal. I was just living proof that it could be done. Quietly, slowly, without screaming into the void for justice. At the next showing, I brought my dog. He sat by my feet, calm, loyal, solid. Everything she never was. Someone asked me if I had a name for the series. I hadn't, but I looked up at the largest piece in the room, a jagged skyline of blue, fractured by streaks of gold and gray, and I said the first thing that came to mind: reconstruction. Later that evening, I saw my reflection in the gallery glass. Not haunted, not hollow, just there, whole. No longer a reaction to her, just a man, still standing. And somewhere across the city, Cindy was probably telling another version of the story, one where she was misunderstood, mistreated, unfairly punished. She always had a talent for fiction, but fiction doesn't change reality. Reality was this: she was gone, and I was finally completely, unshakably okay. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.